After 25 years of climbing the corporate ladder, fighting deadlines and surviving endless boardroom battles, I was burned out. Not just tired, burned out. The kind where your soul feels singed, and even the thought of Monday morning makes your stomach twist into a knot. I'd saved well, invested right, and finally reached the point where I could say, that's enough. It was time to step away and reclaim some peace in my life. I started looking for a place far from the chaos. I wasn't asking for much, just somewhere quiet, green, and detached from the never-ending grind. I dreamed of a small garden, early, morning walks, and the kind of neighbors who waved politely but didn't knock unless the house was on fire. But one requirement sat at the very top of my list, above even price or square footage. No-HOA. Homeowners associations had always rubbed me the wrong way. I couldn't understand the appeal of paying someone to boss you around about your mailbox color or grass height. No thank you. I'd had enough of micromanagement in my career. I wasn't about to retire into more of it. After months of scrolling through listings and attending open houses, I found it. A charming 3-bedroom ranch-style house tucked at the edge of a cul-de-sac. It had a big front yard shaded by 2 old oaks, a fenced backyard with just enough space for a garden, and a wide, welcoming porch. But the best part? In bold letters on the listing, not part of HOA. I triple-checked everything. My realtor confirmed it. The title company did too. The county parcel records showed my property outlined just outside the neighborhood's HOA boundary. It was like this one house had slipped through the cracks, a little slice of freedom carved out in the middle of cookie-cutter conformity. I put in an offer the same day and moved in a month later. That first week felt like a dream. Birds chirping in the morning, no sirens at night, and neighbors who smiled from a distance but didn't pry. I planted herbs by the kitchen window, set up a reading nook in the sunroom, and even started sketching again. Something I hadn't done in years. There were no violation notices, no one peering over the fence to check for unauthorized flower beds, and certainly no letters about how my trash can was 2 inches too visible from the street. I'd finally found my peace, or so I thought. Because as it turns out, even when you buy a house that's legally not a part of the HOA, there's always someone convinced that they own everything they can see, someone who believes that rules matter more than rights, someone with a clipboard, an attitude, and a personal vendetta against anyone who doesn't fall in line. I had no idea how wrong I was about the peace part. It happened about a week after I moved in. I was in the front yard enjoying a surprisingly cool morning for late spring, planting lavender along the walkway, when I saw her approaching. She had the look. You know the one. Crisply pressed khakis, pastel polo shirt tucked in like she was reporting for duty, and of course the clipboard. Always the clipboard. It was like a badge of authority she wore on her hip, as if it gave her power to rule the neighborhood. "Hello there," she called out, giving me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the new homeowner at 1826. I stood up, wiping dirt from my gloves. "Yep, that's me, just moved in last week." "I'm Karen," she said, extending a hand she clearly didn't expect to get dirty. "President of the Willow Creek HOA. I just wanted to stop by and personally welcome you to the community." Before I could even say thank you, she was already reaching into a manila folder and pulling out a thick packet of papers. "And here," she added, thrusting it into my hands, "are your HOA covenants, rules, and architectural guidelines. We do expect all new residents to review them within their first 30 days, and there's a fine schedule on the last page." I blinked at the packet, then looked back at her. "I appreciate you stopping by," I said carefully, "but my property isn't part of the HOA. That was actually one of the reasons I bought this house." Her smile twitched. "Oh," she said with mock surprise. "That's a common misunderstanding, but actually, all the homes in this subdivision are bound by the HOA, whether you want to be or not. It's in the original developer's agreement. I'm sure your realtor just didn't explain it properly." I could feel my stomach tighten a little, but I kept my voice calm. "Actually, I verified it with the title company and county records. My lot was separated before the HOA was formed. I'm not under its jurisdiction. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Well, she said, adjusting her clipboard like a soldier adjusting a weapon. You might think that, but we've had situations before where people believed they were exempt, and they weren't. You'll still be expected to comply. We all have to live by the same rules, after all. I stepped back and walked over to the mailbox where I'd tucked a folder of property documents, still fresh from the move. I pulled out a copy of the plat map and HOA boundary document, then showed her the clear exclusion of my lot. She looked at it for all of 3 seconds, scoffed, and waved her hand dismissively. Well, she said, suddenly cold, we'll just see about that. And with that, she spun on her heel and marched back down the sidewalk like she'd just served me a subpoena. I stood there, the HOA packet still in my hand, heart rate slightly elevated. Something told me this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe Karen was just the type who needed time to accept things that didn't go her way. I figured once she realized I wasn't going to play her little HOA game, she'd move on to someone else, someone who actually had to listen to her. I underestimated her pettiness. It started with a bright yellow slip taped to my front door. I noticed it as I came back from the grocery store, fluttering in the wind like a warning flag. At the top in bold letters, notice of HOA violation. The listed offense? Unapproved. Mailbox design. My mailbox, mind you, was a standard black metal post with a red flag. Completely normal. Nothing flashy, nothing custom. Just a mailbox. I crumpled the notice, tossed it in the trash, and went about my day. A few days later, another slip appeared. This time a warning about my trash bins being visible from the street. According to the notice, they needed to be stored out of sight, within 1 hour of pickup. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. These were rules that applied to members of the HOA. I wasn't one of them. And yet, here she was, playing neighborhood cop, enforcing rules that had no legal bearing on me. Then came the anonymous calls to the city. A week later, a city inspector knocked on my door to inform me someone had reported me for a list of alleged violations. Overgrown weeds, there weren't any. Improper fencing. My fence was existing and grandfathered in. And exterior structures in disrepair, meaning my garden shed, which was freshly painted and in perfect condition. The inspector, thankfully, was a decent guy. After a quick look around, he apologized and told me he'd be closing the case. Off the record, he said it seemed like a nuisance complaint. I knew exactly who the nuisance was. Still, I told myself it would die down eventually. Maybe Karen just needed to feel like she was doing her job. Maybe she'd get bored once. She realized I wasn't biting. Then I got the letter. It arrived in a pristine white envelope with a return address from the law offices of some firm I'd never heard of. Inside, on thick letterhead paper, was a formal notice. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association hereby demands that the homeowner at 1826 Mapleview Court comply with the governing rules and architectural standards of the community. Failure to comply has resulted in legal action. It went on for 2 full pages, citing bylaws, listing alleged violations, and accusing me of breach of community standards. At the bottom was the real kicker. You are hereby being sued by the Willow Creek HOA. I stared at the letter in disbelief. My hands started to tremble, not from fear, but from pure, unfiltered rage. This wasn't just Karen pushing her luck with notes and noise. She had dragged me into a full-blown legal mess over rules that didn't even apply to me. She was trying to bully me with a lawsuit she had no right to file. For someone who had spent their life avoiding drama, I'd somehow ended up at the center of a ridiculous suburban turf war, and it was time I stopped ignoring it. The moment I finished reading that lawsuit, I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. I wasn't going to let some clipboard dictator drag me into a war of paperwork and petty legal threats without backup. So, I found a real estate attorney, someone who specialized in HOA disputes, land use rights, and exactly this kind of nonsense. Her name was Ellen, and within 5 minutes of our first meeting, she had me feeling like I might actually come out of this on top. She sifted through my documents, title deed, survey maps, HOA boundaries, all the boring stuff I'd triple-checked before moving in, and gave a satisfied nod. Your property is not, and never has been, under the HOA's jurisdiction, she said plainly. It was explicitly excluded from the association's formation documents. The original developer carved out your lot before filing the HOA's governing documents. You're legally in the clear. I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in days. So, what now? We file a motion to dismiss. And if they want to push this any further, we'll make them pay for wasting everyone's time. I liked her style. A week later, we filed the motion, complete with supporting evidence, parcel maps, HOA charter records, and a notarized statement from the title company. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning, and I'll admit, I didn't sleep much. The night before, not because I was afraid, but because I was angry. Angry that I had to waste time and money to prove something that should have been obvious to anyone with basic reading comprehension. When I walked into the courtroom, Karen was already there, front row, flanked by 2 HOA board members like some kind of miniature entourage. She wore a smug smile like it was part of her wardrobe, clipboard in hand, of course. Always the clipboard. She didn't even acknowledge me. Just whispered something to the guy next to her and chuckled under her breath. The judge came in and the room settled. Ellen stood up, presented our motion to dismiss, and laid everything out. The historical separation of my property from the HOA, the recorded boundary lines, and the lack of any governing authority over my parcel. Karen's lawyer tried to argue implied consent, since my property was within the neighborhood visually, whatever that meant. He actually said, "It disrupts the uniformity of the community." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me to force someone into an HOA they never joined, with no recorded obligation because their house looks like it's part of the neighborhood?" Karen's lawyer stammered. Karen herself looked like she was trying to signal him telepathically to say something smarter. Ellen calmly handed over the official plat maps and the developer's original filing that excluded my property from the HOA. The judge flipped through the pages, then leaned back, clear as day. The homeowner at 1826 Mapleview Court is not bound by the HOA. The association has no legal authority over this property. He dropped the gavel and added, "Case dismissed, with prejudice." Karen stood up like someone had set off a firecracker. Under her chair, "Excuse me, Your Honor," she barked. "You can't just let him, this man, defy the rules we've all agreed to. He's ruining the community." The judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, sit down. You're out of order." But Karen wasn't done. She turned on Ellen. "You're enabling lawlessness. This is what happens when people think they're above the rules." Then she whirled on me. "You think you can just walk in here and tear everything down we've built over 20 years? You don't belong here." Security was already moving in by the time she finished her tirade. The judge called a 5-minute recess, clearly done with her meltdown. Outside the courtroom, as Ellen and I walked to the parking lot, she shook her head with a wry smile. "That woman's drunk on power." "She's about to get a hangover," I muttered. And just like that, I wasn't the target anymore. I was the problem she couldn't control. She'd picked the wrong person to try and bully. Game on after the courtroom humiliation. Karen didn't just simmer down. She went into full-blown meltdown mode. Losing in public, especially in front of her little HOA entourage, must have fractured whatever fragile grip she had on her sense of authority. And since she couldn't beat me legally, she decided to wage war the old-fashioned way, with pettiness, sabotage, and harassment. It started with garbage. One morning I walked out to find a pile of trash bags dumped right at the edge of my lawn. Not just a bag or two, either. 6 black plastic bags ripped open, garbage spilling out into the grass. Rotten food, beer bottles, used tissues. It looked like someone had cleaned out a dumpster and decided my yard was the new landfill. I knew who it was, of course. I had no proof yet, but no one else had a motive, and Karen had just enough ego to think she could get away with it. I cleaned it up, furious but calm. No reaction, that was key. A few days later, I caught a tow truck creeping in front of my driveway. I stepped outside just in time to see the driver get out and walk toward E. "My car, can I help you?" I asked. He looked startled. Yeah, we got a report this car was in violation of neighborhood parking restrictions, blocking the street." I looked at my car, parked perfectly in my own driveway. I didn't even have to guess who reported it. "I suggest you turn around before this becomes your problem," I said. And after a bit of hemming and hawing, he got back in the truck and drove off. Then came the fake fines. Envelopes started appearing in my mailbox, not through the postal service, just dropped, and by hand. They looked official at first glance. HOA letterhead, formal language, a list of infractions and escalating penalties. Things like unauthorized flag display, a garden wind spinner, non-conforming fence color. It was beige, for God's sake. And my favorite, failure to respond to previous warnings. Ellen laughed when I showed her. "Completely unenforceable, keep them, we'll use them later." That's when I decided it was time to stop reacting and start preparing. I installed security cameras, front yard, driveway, backyard, even one pointing at my mailbox. I set them to record on motion and backed everything up to the cloud, and then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 weeks after the cameras went up, I caught her. The footage was crystal clear. Middle of the night, Karen in her bathrobe and slippers creeping up my driveway. She looked around, took her keys out of her pocket and ran them right down the side of my car, twice. Then she smirked, flipped off my camera without realizing it was right there, and walked off like she hadn't just committed a felony. I stood there in my kitchen, watching the footage on my laptop, heart pounding. Not from shock, but from satisfaction. She wasn't just an angry neighbor anymore. She was trespassing, vandalizing, harassing. And now finally I had proof. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. I just saved the video, labeled the folder Karen Evidence Confirmed, and sent a copy to Ellen. Because now, this wasn't about neighbor drama anymore. It was criminal. I didn't sleep much the night after watching the footage. Not because I was worried. No, that part of me had burned out weeks ago. But because I was wired, focused. The kind of clarity you only get when the pieces of a long, slow game finally fall into place. I backed up the video twice. Sent one copy to my attorney, another to a private drive I kept offline. Then I picked up the phone and called the non-emergency police line. The officer on the other end listened carefully. I explained everything. Months of harassment, fake fines, garbage dumps, the keyed car, and now cold, clear footage of the HOA president herself committing vandalism on private property. They sent an officer out the next morning. He watched the footage in my kitchen, his face impassive but his brow tightening as Karen, in all her bathrobed glory, raked her keys down the side of my car. "Yep," he finally said. "That's criminal mischief, trespassing, and property damage at minimum." He took a statement and opened a formal case, but I wasn't stopping there. With Ellen's help, we filed for a civil harassment restraining order. California has specific provisions for neighbors engaged in patterns of intimidation and harassment. We documented everything. Every fake notice, every bogus fine, the tow truck incident, even photos of the garbage. Then we filed criminal charges: vandalism, trespassing, harassment. Ellen was giddy. Most people never document this stuff this well. She's toast. The real pièce de résistance? The next HOA board meeting. Karen never missed a chance to hold court, and she especially loved berating residents publicly about community standards. Though I wasn't a member, HOA meetings were open to the public, and I showed up early, quietly sitting near the back of the small community center room, arms folded, phone ready. Karen strutted in 10 minutes late like a queen entering her throne room. Clipboard, matching blazer set, thin smile pulled so tight it looked painful. She didn't acknowledge me, probably hadn't even noticed I was there. The meeting started. She launched into her usual monologue about the integrity of the neighborhood and the importance of residents cooperating with guidelines. She ranted about unauthorized flags, non-conforming lawn decor, and people flaunting the rules, as if her voice alone could shape policy. And then, right in the middle of a sentence about community image, the back doors opened, and in walked two uniformed police officers. You could feel the oxygen get sucked out of the room. Karen paused mid-sentence, faltered, then tried to recover. If there's a safety concern, I'll ask that we address it after. Karen Whitmore? The taller officer asked firmly. Her face paled. Yes? We have a warrant for your arrest. Please stand up. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen blinked. Excuse me, this is a mistake. I'm conducting a meeting. Ma'am, please stand. You're being placed under arrest for vandalism, trespassing, and criminal harassment. Someone in the audience gasped. Karen stood, but not quietly. This is outrageous. He set me up. He's not even in the HOA. He's a plant. You're all part of this conspiracy. He's tearing this place apart. She pointed directly. Me. You, this is your doing. I didn't move, just stared at her as they cuffed her wrists and began reading her rights. No, you don't understand. I built this community. He doesn't even belong here. Her voice cracked as they walked her out, hands behind her back, ranting about bylaws and integrity and corruption. The meeting was silent for a full minute after the door closed behind her. Then someone muttered, Well, that happened. I stood, nodded to the stunned board, and walked out into the night air. Cool, quiet, peaceful for the first time in months. It was over. Karen had finally been removed from her throne, not by force, but by her own hand. Revenge doesn't always need fire or fury. Sometimes it just needs a camera, a little patience, and the satisfying sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. You'd think someone had detonated a bomb in the middle of suburbia. The gossip mill spun into overdrive, the HOA board scrambled for damage control, and residents who'd once blindly followed Karen's clipboard crusades suddenly developed amnesia about ever supporting her. Within a week, the HOA held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her from the board, effective immediately due to misconduct. No drama, no ceremony, just a quiet update in the next newsletter, right next to a note about someone stealing decorative rocks from the community garden. Justice, apparently, pairs well with garden theft. As for my legal wins, they kept rolling in. With Ellen's help, I filed a small claims suit for the damage to my car and emotional distress from months of harassment. Between the repair bills, legal fees, and documented stress, the judge awarded me a tidy sum. Karen didn't even show up to contest it. Maybe she finally realized she wasn't queen of the courtroom either. But the cherry on top? The new HOA president, some poor guy named Rick, who looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight, personally delivered a letter to my mailbox, on official HOA letterhead no less. It read, We hereby confirm that your property at 1826 Mapleview Court is not, and has never been, under the jurisdiction of the Willow Creek HOA. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, harassment, and legal trouble caused by our former leadership. I had that sucker laminated. From that point on, the vibe in the neighborhood flipped like a switch. The same people who used to give me side eyes now waved when I walked my dog. A few even came by to apologize for not saying something sooner. One sweet couple dropped off a peach pie. Another neighbor, Greg, a retired firefighter, invited me to his backyard BBQ, slapped me on the back and said, We were all just waiting for someone to take her down. I smiled, took a bite of pie, and decided forgiveness tasted suspiciously like cinnamon and victory. And then I made a little addition to my front yard. Right under my mailbox, I placed a handcrafted wooden sign, painted in bold letters, Still not in your HOA, Karen. Neighbors loved it. Rick pretended not to see it. I'd sit on my porch some evenings, lemonade in hand, feet up, while kids rode scooters down the sidewalk and dogs barked in backyards. The street felt lighter now, like it could finally breathe again. Karen? Well, last I heard, she moved 2 towns over to a gated community. God help them. As for me, I finally got what I came for. Peace, quiet, and absolutely no HOA oversight. Just the way I like it. Looking back, it still feels surreal that buying a home, something meant to be the start of a peaceful chapter, turned into a bizarre suburban war zone. I moved in expecting birdsong and backyard barbecues. Instead, I got fines for non-existent violations, vandalism from someone in a pantsuit, and legal drama that would have made a great courtroom series on Netflix. And all because one person let little authority go straight to her head. That's the thing about HOAs. At their best, they're supposed to maintain community standards and protect property values. At their worst, they become little dictatorships run by people who think power means control, not responsibility. Karen didn't just overstep. She stomped across every boundary she could find, all because I dared to live outside her rulebook. So here's what I learned, and what I'd pass along to anyone considering buying a home. Do your research. Don't just take a real estate agent's word for it. Check the county records, the plat maps, and the HOA charter itself. Make sure your property is either fully included or fully excluded, and get that in writing. Document everything. Harassment isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. Letters, fines, passive-aggressive notes on your trash cans. Keep a file. Take photos. Save emails. Record conversations if your state allows it. That paper trail? It's your sword and shield. Get legal help early. Don't wait until things get ugly. A good attorney can spot flaws in an HOA's claims before they even escalate. And trust me, judges do not like HOA board members who try to bully homeowners with fake rules. Most of all, don't be afraid to stand your ground. Bullies rely on silence, they feed off fear. But the moment you show you're not playing their game, their power starts to crack. In the end, I got my peace, not by backing down, but by pushing back harder, smarter, and louder when it mattered. And, hey, if you're dealing with your own neighborhood tyrant, just remember this. Sometimes peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. Sometimes you earn it, one restraining order at a time.